and welcome to our webinar on ROI, the ROI of food safety. My name is Rachel Nemeth. I am the CEO of Opus Training, and if you're not familiar with Opus, long story short, we are the employee training platform that's purpose-built for restaurants. Before I let our panelists introduce themselves, I just want to set some context on why we're here and why we wanted to have this discussion. Really, when it comes down to is it's no secret that ensuring the health and safety of your customers and employees isn't only about foodborne illness. It's about a lot more. It's about business reputation. It's about steering clear of any legal issues or challenges that could be costly. It's about meeting regulatory standards. And all of that truly bubbles up to just building trust and loyalty with customers. So training is one piece of supporting food safety, but it's not everything. So today I'm really excited to moderate this panel featuring experts and friends at Opus, Christine Schindler from PassSpot, Nick Eastwood from Always Food Safe, and Derek Rosenbaum from Groucho's Deli. I'm going to let them introduce themselves momentarily, but I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to explore here. We're going to talk about the kind of full spectrum of strategies for restaurants of any size, really, and type so that they can enhance their food safety practices. We're going to start with some basics on things like food handlers and food manager certifications with Nick at Always Food Safe. We'll be talking about integrating really interesting and innovative tech, like what PathSpot is offering. And you're going to hear directly from a multi-unit operator and owner, Derek, who's being really strategic about his team, his customers, and his franchisees. So we're going to cover it all in a very small amount of time. We promise we will make it valuable for you. And to those who are watching right now, please, you're more than welcome to use the chat function. Toss me any questions anytime throughout the discussion. We are very conversational here at Opus, and I'll be sure to work them in. So when you ask a question, just include where you work so that the panelists have some context to answer your question for you. You can direct it at one person, you can direct it at everyone, you can direct it at the food safety gods, whatever feels right to you. You have the experts here to answer these questions, and so we welcome you to participate. So with that in mind, I wanted to start by letting our panelists introduce themselves, and maybe to keep things focused, I wanted to ask you all to tell us who you are, of course, but also tell us briefly how the issue of food safety really became so important for you personally. So maybe, Derek, I'd love to actually start with you.
Perfect. Well, my name is Derek Rosenbaum. I am the president and CTO for Groucho's Deli. We are an 83-year-old brand based out of Columbia, South Carolina. We started franchising in the early 2000s, and we have 30 units today in the Carolinas and Georgia. Obviously, there's an inherent reason why we practice food safety. We're dealing with the general public, so that's kind of table stakes. That's a given. That's what we have to do. From a personal side, well, two things. As we grow a franchise and we and my people are less hands-on and more, out of the day-to-day operations, I have to think about how do we scale food safety and how do we have the accountability and the measurement of food safety and all the different components of food safety. And then on a personal level, I have children with severe food allergies. So I understand at a very deep level the anxiety and the emotion and the fear around eating out. And we have an extremely robust allergen program. And yes, my personal experiences has led to that happening. That 100%, absolutely unbiased. But this is a more common occurrence day to day. Christine and I could probably have a 2-hour podcast on the hygiene theory and while these things are happening. But to me, we have a responsibility as hosts, as restaurateurs, as providers of hospitality to accommodate our guests any way we can. Can we always succeed? No, but we need to do what we can to be there to serve them, to provide that comfort and ease and anxiety any way we can. And I'm happy to share later some actual real ROI on why that matters.
Yeah, I want to come back to that too, Derek. Thank you for sharing that context. We're definitely going to come back to food allergens. It's a huge part of this story. Christine, I'm going to toss it to you.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Schindler with PathSpot Technologies. Our tools are created to provide that ROI and technology driven approach to safety in the back of house. So we cover everything from hand washing and hygiene to temperature monitoring to expiration management to digital audits and checklists, and really strive to create a streamlined and data driven approach to these elements of safety while driving real operational impact for the organizations we get the opportunity to work together with. For myself, my background is in biomedical engineering and global and public health. And while I started on the research and healthcare side of that world, I started to recognize that there were so many global and public health issues here in day to day life outside of our hospital networks and systems that really impact individuals where they actually are on a day-to-day basis. And one of those that I was really drawn to were these huge issues that exist in our food supply system, partially because there's just not the ability and time and resourcing to be able to look at all the different components that exist as risk factors in day-to-day operations, and the number of people that impacts, from team members to people interacting. I mean, we're all eating food every single day. And so, from a public health aspect, I became incredibly passionate about developing easy, low cost, and durable tools to build that into day to day food safety practices.
Thanks, Christine. Super interested to hear your thoughts later on about ROI, especially from your data perspective. I know you have a lot of interesting points, so we'll come back to that. Nick, we're going to round out intros with you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Eastwood, and I am president of Always Food Safe Company. We are a ANSI accredited certification provider. Very hard for me to say. We concentrate on the food protection manager training and exam, food handler, and also allergy awareness training. As that's already been mentioned, it is becoming a major issue within the US. It's hard to tell, but I've done 30 years in the food industry. Don't say anything. Um, and I kind of moved from a manufacturing suppliers into food safety as kind of my career developed. Um, what we kind of looked at was how do we develop training that's relevant to the new market? So how do we do it so we're not dragging people into a classroom to talk about temperature danger zones? How do we do it? Do we video based? Do we film in kitchens? And that's kind of how we've built what we believe in. Um, why? Good question. It's about protecting the public. That's our job. Whatever you say, that is what we're all here to do. Um, I personally want to eat in a restaurant where it's a great experience and I'm not ill afterwards. So, that's the basic common sense. Also about improving and helping a restaurant to develop its reputation as well. You know, good food safety usually shows in the quality of the restaurant and the experience, literally from quality of food to dining to food safety. It's all the same. You can tell a very, very well run business. And, we're hopefully here, like I said, to help increase that reputation. So, as you can probably tell, I've been in the US for 7 years now, originally from Manchester in the UK. If anybody can't understand me, I'm happy to interpret anything I've said on the chat box. So please bear with me while I do that. So no, thank you, and it's great to be invited. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Nick. I don't have any need for subtitles right now for your accent, but at some point I might need some clarification. Um, well, let's dig in. So, obviously, I wanted you all to introduce yourselves. You're all very clearly um, pros at this and have different perspectives. I want to start by just defining food safety as you might read it in a textbook. At a really high level, it's about best practices and procedures that ensure that we're serving food to customers that's safe to eat. It's as basic as that. And there's really five pillars that we always hear about. There's personal hygiene, there's training, there's safe food handling, and storage. There is cleaning and sanitizing, and then there's pest control and waste management. I would kind of bucket those to the same category. Some statistics to land with here is that, we have all of these pillars and all of these standards that restaurants have to uphold, yet these problems persist. We took a look at some FDA data pre-COVID, because I think a lot of the time we kind of make COVID the excuse here. But what's interesting is, like, this has trended over time, right? In 2017, the FDA report cites that there were 48 million illnesses and 3,000 deaths. And in 2017, also over 64% of foodborne illness outbreaks, were from restaurants. So we know that this is a problem that persists. You each have this really unique perspective on this topic. I'm really curious, David or Derek, maybe we can start with you. From your point of view, what trends have shifted how restaurants approach food safety standards over the years? What's becoming more extreme? What's becoming less extreme? What stayed the same?
I think it's going to be subjective to the brand and the brand's objectives, and to also the state in which you operate, because each state interprets the FDA food code in a very different way. I mean, we have stores in North Carolina, we have stores in South Carolina and Georgia. They all have different interpretations of the FDA food code. Some more stringent, some not. We tend to just take the maximum of all and make that our standard. And then we go above and beyond that, above what I would call the table stakes, the hand washing, the temperature holding, the FIFO practices, the food storage, the cleaning, the sanitation, the handling, the cross contamination. I call those table stakes. That should happen. I think what has changed, with COVID is good, bad, or indifferent. COVID amplified consumer awareness around hygiene. I think especially personal hygiene.
Mm,
Um, Hand washing, appearance, your clothing, how does one present themselves? All of these things, and people have different interpretations of what that is to them, and it is very subjective on the consumer side. I mean, some consumers find body jewelry to be unhygienic. It's really, to me, the biggest shift I'm seeing is in consumer trends around diet and dietary preferences.
mm,
And how do we meet the consumers where they are, whether it's a trend, whether it's a fad, whether it's a true food allergy or a functional gastrointestinal disease. We're not here to adjudicate that. That's not our place. We're not experts. We're not doctors. We're not gastroenterologists. We're here to meet our customers the best way we can and serve them the best way we can. We can't check all the boxes. It's impossible.
mm,
Um, there are some really niche food sensitivities out there that we have all the information. We can educate our consumers. We can educate our staff. We have everything there for them. But at the end of the day, the customer has to make the decision what's best for their body and how their body responds to those things. So to
mm,
me, that's the biggest shift I've seen. I think from the franchise side and what we're doing, we're taking a more holistic approach, and I'm thinking at it as how do we scale it, and how do we again bring that accountability and to the store level, knowing that I hate to say it in my state, that they're so short staffed on health inspectors. It's
mm,
sometimes 18 months between inspections.
yeah.
And they tend to leave us alone because they know that we self audit on a very regular cadence. So they know that we're self auditing, whether the mom and pop place down the street probably isn't doing that. They're just trying to put food on their family's table at the end of the week. So it's priority, and then for me, it's the consumer trends, and then how does that relate to their personal preferences.
Well, and you say something interesting too about staff shortages. This isn't just about our teams, it's about the auditing teams too. And a lot of that is getting harder and harder to place those jobs. So, if we're putting all these regulations in place, what are our strategies for actually holding our people accountable if we don't have the structure for it? Especially to your point, when there's a consumer environment that's getting more demanding,
Um,
regardless
You
of
have
what those demands may be, you know.
you have to deploy tools like Opus, and you have to deploy tools like PathSpot to fill in that gap, to bridge the gap with the labor shortages and automating some of this. I don't want to say mundane, but it is repetitive things, right? So using tools in a smart way, in an intelligent way to deliver that assurance of food safety. Like when customers see us scan our hands on a PathSpot can, their minds are blown. They're like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "It's just basic. Like, I, I don't know off the top of my head our our fail scan rate, but it's very very low. But that one scan that failed, that could have been a cross contamination to a customer, right? So that's providing a peace of mind to me, and then we're providing accountability to our managers. You know, Christine has members on our team who meet weekly with our managers and hold them accountable. And it's not just us holding them accountable; it's our partners holding our teams accountable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and one thing that it's also, I'm curious, Nick, to hear your perspective on this. Any trends that you've noticed um, in food safety over the past couple of years, whether it's specific on the food handlers, food manager side, or just, industry wide?
Yeah. I was kind of writing notes there as I didn't want to repeat what Derek said. I completely agree with what Derek says on that. What we're finding is the well-run restaurants are working a lot closer with training providers and also the health inspectors. We're seeing rather than running and hiding when a health inspector comes through the front door, they actually want to work with them. As Derek said, there's not as many health inspectors about now, so the good businesses want to get them into the business, want to understand how they can do better. So that's one point. Yes, consumer trends, they expect more from a business. That's I don't think that'll ever go away. And what we're seeing is kind of this is a perfect example. Food safety providers are all starting to work closer together to then go to a business and say, okay, for example, you have one supplier of food safety training. So that's, the three of us in the room here, is what we're looking for. And customers do want that. They want a single sign in, easy access to everything, and one invoice, if I'm being honest as well. They do like that. I think you're also seeing more and more automation, like as Derek said. I'm talking things like temperature monitoring. I'm
Mm,
talking, renewal of certificates from our point of view. We are taking some of the more, as you said, mundane things off a busy person's plate, and we are doing it for them. So we're seeing a lot of that. And the other trend I'm going to say, which is also a little bit of a concern, is the increase in food deliveries using the Uber Just Eat type of companies as well. So, but that's kind of separate. But in the main, I see more companies working together to supply a product, a service that a business wants now in one kind of one-stop shop. So,
that can either kind of replace or enhance that employee
yes,
experience. Yeah,
yes,
do either. I think maybe due to the shortage, but also to your point, we are hitting a point where some restaurants aren't seeing a shortage. So now it's about how can you get more out of your team and how can they
yeah,
be more productive.
yeah.
Yeah, I still remember the refrigerator logs. Those are fun. good, good, good shift over to Christine to round out. Any additional trends that you've seen, Christine, on the food safety side?
I mean, I think everything that has been said is spot on. And that's one of our solutions, right? Is automating those refrigerator logs. I will say that one aspect in addition in this moment of labor and team members, especially back of house team members, desiring to feel valued and seen, I think investing in safety and allowing them to also feel safe in their environment and to be utilized appropriately is a huge trend,
Mm.
especially coming out of 2020 and beyond. And so, one of my favorite things is the uptick in team members saying that they want to feel safe at work and that they want to feel utilized. And so, saying to a team member, instead of filling out a refrigeration log, you're going to now spend that time on guest experience. You're going to spend that time on preparing food. You're going to spend that time on training more team members. And hearing them say to me, that makes me feel valued because I know that my Nest at home is texting me the temperature of all my rooms. So it's definitely possible. And so I think team member value is huge in this labor environment, but also just in general, as there's an expectation there that we should have as the backbone of so many of these operations.
Classic
Well,
example of an intangible ROI.
mm,
ROI point number one. There we go.
oh, sorry, something.
How about that?
It's bright red too. I love it.
It's kind of a theme with us.
Thanks, Jared. Um, so that's actually the perfect segue to really get to the meat of this discussion. And I appreciate all of you sharing these trends because what comes after understanding the direction in which food safety is moving and what employee sentiment is, what guest sentiment is. John in our chat here says it's more about employee behavior now than it's just about food safety practices, which I think is a great way to sum this up. But I want to shift gears and talk about approach ROI. Every restaurant is doing some sort of food safety training, even if it's bare minimum. So ROI is really centered around justifying any sort of additional investment. And so, Derek, I actually want to kick this off with you as an operator, as a buyer. How do you assess your food safety programs, their impact, and where do you identify that there's a need for further investment?
I mean, again, I'm coming at this from a different perspective, looking at growth and scalability and
Mm,
how do we manage that? Um, you know, we've made the investment in the allergen menus and the training and the resources and the dedicated kits and the workflows and the temp monitoring and the hand washing and the task management. I mean, we use pretty much most of Christine's suite. Um, I think unfortunately in our industry, there's this ingrained mindset around, you know, uh, operators and decision makers tend to, what I like to say, step over dollars to save a few pennies and can't really see the long range ROI. It's all about immediate return. And I don't think that's the right way. And I don't know if you were in the room last week when Kendall gave his presentation, Rachel,
mm-mm.
but he brought up the concept of SaaS, and we all know it as software as a service, right? He brought it to this as solutions advancing accessibility and scalability, and I'm like, that is genius, and I'm going to use it forever. I mean, it's like on a giant whiteboard in our conference room right now. I was like, that is amazing. And so it's really, how do you look at it from qualitative and quantitative perspectives? And then, measuring both the tangible and the intangible ROIs. And, I mean, do you want me to share a use case of what we're actually doing?
Yeah.
So prior to the call, I went into our CDP tool and ran a couple segments around our engaged customer base for the last year. Customers that are habitual, that dine with us daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly within the last 365 days. Here's the data of that segment. The average order value for those guests was $20.66. They visited 9.3 times in the last year and have a lifetime value of $191.54. I then further distilled that group down to only gluten-free customers who have an established history of ordering gluten-free bread and gluten-free desserts. I mean, and that doesn't include the salad people because you can't really track that as gluten-free. And the results are, I mean, they speak for themselves. So the in-ticket average increased 11% to $22.89. The number of visits increased 61% to 15, and the lifetime value increased 78% to $342.50. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty good return on investment. And
Yeah.
as a parent of a child or children with severe food allergies, I know when they find an establishment that they feel comfortable and safe eating, they have a lifetime customer. And I have seen this over and over and over and over through our support mechanisms, customers thanking us. And another quick use case, we were rolling out task management with Christine's group, and so we have daily checklists, weekly checklists, monthly checklists. And I'm like, we're going to see how this works. We're just going to let it run. We finished the first month. The store did not do 2 tasks on the monthly task list. As soon as the month closed, I sent in our field auditor with no preconceptions, nothing, no notice given. He came, the 2 things that they were written up for on their inspection were the 2 things that were not completed on the task list. And what that does is it just shows you, these are longtime employees. I mean, the general manager of that store has worked for us for 18 years. It shows you that people care, they want to do their jobs, but sometimes they just, they just gloss over and they stop seeing things, or it just,
Mm.
it's routine, and they just, or they think somebody else is handling it, or this shift's supposed to be doing this. And again, it brings that accountability. And what really has amazed me about the whole thing is how well it's been embraced. I was expecting so much change resistance, not so much with the temp monitoring, because that's an easy checkbox, that's an easy ROI. Like, you lose one walk-in worth of groceries, you paid for that all year, all month. you know it was shocking to me that, to the point that it brings value to our team members, and it shows that we appreciate them, and that we care, and this hand washing mechanisms and these other things bring value and allows them to actually focus on the core competencies of their job.
Mm. This concept of filling in the gaps is really interesting. It's like, it's almost I'm going to totally butcher the old saying of perfection is the enemy of progress. It's almost like repetition is the enemy of progress, because you have no checks and balances. So having something that can hold people accountable can really help you see ROI and tracking. I think I'm going to come back to you, Derek, because there's kind of another side of the employee experience I'm interested to hear. I want to toss it to Christine and Nick, though, and hear from the vendor side. You're having these conversations all the time. What do you advise companies, whether it's your product or not, just in general, when they're thinking about food safety? What are some things that they should be considering that are actually measurable and tangible?
I mean, I think a lot of it is, how do you increase operational throughput, right? And so many times I'm sitting and I love to meet our customers on site at their restaurants, and the lines are wrapped around. I mean, there is so much happening. And so a lot of it is, how can we actually pull more people through and see very tangible ROI from investing in process driven approaches to just ensure everything is done right and appropriately. Like, that is one of the things that I think people don't often look to, are those numbers. I mean, we obviously look at labor components and general manager turnover and other aspects, but I mean, I just encourage, like, let's look at, if we create an infrastructure around safety, how does that impact the overall operations of a restaurant? And it's funny, people always say, they're like, well, yeah, the best restaurants I ever worked at that did the most money were the cleanest, most efficient. Everyone knew what they were doing. So this is great news, right? Because it means, by doing the right thing, the thing we all want to do, the thing that no one who gets into food service ever wants to do something that's unsafe for a team member or a customer. I mean, this is a service driven, caring profession in every single aspect. And so, how do we empower that and then see and reap the rewards and benefits for team members? That's a lot of what we encourage everyone to look at.
I love that concept of operational throughput, and I feel like we're seeing it more and more in the industry these days as well. And I think Derek mentioning a CDP, a customer data platform, and things that can actually help kind of understand that whole journey are starting to help us get some more of those numbers. Nick, anything to add to that around advice that you'd give folks who are thinking about how to measure ROI for food safety?
Excuse me. Yeah, a couple of things to look at when we are usually called into a restaurant group. The first issue they have is staff retention, obviously, and we find if training occurs within 30 days, staff retention is 82%, which is high. When you think average staff turnover can be up to 160% in a year, we find staff are more demanding when they're also, because of the labour shortage still, they're looking around at which is the best prospect for them. And yeah, you're right, you're going into a clean, well-run business. it all starts to kind of add up. Obviously, from our point of view, the food safety training, you know, we want them to take it within the first 7 days, but we find people do it, they're passing at good rates and they're staying. That's the bit. Um, Interestingly, it's something Derek said. You know, obviously, like the food protection manager is every 5 years, but what we're seeing now more and more is at the 1 year stage they're going to refresh. Not necessarily taking the exam because they've got the certificate values, but a lot of business saying right, it's time to refresh, and they're looking at providers such as us to say right, break the training down because it's 8 hours, it's a big course, break it down into 20 minutes. Remind me about temperature control. Remind me about hand washing. Remind me about personal hygiene. So we are starting to see more bite-sized learning happening within the industry. Um, with regards to ROI, like I said, the main thing is staff retention for us. An interesting statistic that did come back. We use obviously the Department of Labour statistics. Only 12% of employees believe they receive satisfactory onboarding training. So you need to get them caught, get the training done quickly, and get them into the business. So, yeah, there's interesting things coming out at the moment, and they do say the ROI on a fully trained member of staff is roughly 353%. In other words, that person is usually in the restaurant, they will be selling, they'll be upselling to customers better, they'll stay longer, you reduce your HR costs of recruiting, training, recruit, train, recruit, train. It's reducing that vicious cycle a lot. So, yeah, that's the bits I've just managed to write down while Derek and Christine was saying, but I agree with everything else you've said as well.
Well, it's interesting to this concept of Sarah, am I echoing?
You're back, fine.
Yeah. I'm going to keep talking for a minute and see if I'm still echoing. Maybe that was just the first time. Okay. Um, so it's interesting what you're talking about when it comes to skills training in those first 30 days. Um, uh, with respect to the labor force, there's a lot more demand to get skills from their employer. I was driving by a Fresh Direct truck the other day. The only thing that truck said was paid skills training. And to that end, what I think is really interesting is um, we see this a lot. There's new hire training, and it includes so much, and you're kind of pummeling new hires with all of this information. And I think food safety sometimes can get relegated as like the kind of ampersand, like, oh, and we got to do food safety. But increasingly, if you want to see ROI on that new hire training, including food safety in those first 10 days or what have you, is actually more likely to empower people to feel skilled. I feel like personally what I used to see is that employers would hold on that training because they didn't want to invest until the employee showed signs that they were going to stay. But now it's actually the thing that makes them stay, because who doesn't want an employer to sponsor their food handler's certificate? I wanted that when I was 16 and working in an ice cream shop. So, and we have a new generation that's demanding those things. I want to keep on the topic of people for a minute and shift it back to you, Derek, but I want to look at the customer side of people for a minute. You talked about the concept of increased sales and loyalty from customers. How else do you measure that customer satisfaction for your food safety practices? Whether it's tangible or intangible, how do you know they know?
So, I mean, if you know me, I believe in this concept around digital relevance, and it's the world we live in, right? I mean, if you're looking for somewhere to go to eat, where do you start? You start at Google, and your relevance is based on an algorithm that none of us will ever understand. But we do know that reviews and your reputation, your recency, your frequency, and your velocity of reviews all matter. We spend a great amount of effort on reputation management. We respond to every piece of feedback, every review. We take the direct feedback, we take the third party feedback from Google, Yelp, TripAdvisor, and now we're actually layering in the third party reviews from DoorDash and Uber, which it's a different customer set, but still it's a customer. And we layer in sentiment analysis around that under like 9 major categories, and then we break those 9 major categories into subcategories from speed of service to food to cleanliness to quality to facilities to all of this. And then we benchmark the chain, and then we use that on an operations level to identify who's doing well, who's not doing well, and then the areas of improvement. And then if we see a systemic pattern, then we stop and we build an Opus module and send it out to the chain saying, this is something we're noticing. Here's the corrective action. Or, we also do it on the same side with the praise. This store is doing this exceptionally well. Here's the best practices they've instituted. Here's what you should emulate, right? So, I mean, it impacts your brand reputation. It impacts employee satisfaction, turnover, cost, risk mitigation, all of these things. And I think food safety and the perception of food safety and the delivery of food safety and quality is certainly highly correlated with food safety. Um, all of these are contributing factors. There's no one thing. It doesn't exist. So you have to take a holistic viewpoint. And I mean, the biggest piece of advice I give you is listen to your customers. They will tell you if you have a problem, whether it's real, perceived, or not. Like, I don't mean, if you read Will Guidara's book, a customer's perception is our reality, and that's how we're training our managers to look at this. And step back, look through their eyes, and say, okay, maybe this is a problem. Maybe we just were blind to it. So that would be my 2 cents on this.
It's to take that to kind of the other side of the spectrum. Groucho's is very tech forward. You've really made a lot of investments and it's paying off. um, I can't remember who I was talking. I think it was Andy Hooper from Hart House. Oh, right. He had the like really great keynote at the QSR summit last week. And even for those who are listening who maybe don't have a customer data platform or even digital training or anything, he was saying, even just having a program where your managers are responding to every single piece of every review that customers are sending, you don't need a fancy platform for that. It's just a protocol. It's an SOP that managers need to follow. And that can show actual physical ROI over time. But I agree with you, Derek. There's some intangible stuff. It's a combination. It's just like how we measure retention. You can't attribute it to one thing. It's many things. Um, Christine, you had some interesting perspectives. You were talking about when it came to, because Derek was referencing digital sales. I want to shift in that direction. Um, while we're on this topic of DoorDash and other delivery providers, you were talking about ROI on data documentation and fine disputes with third-party delivery companies. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think where we see a lot of challenges when it comes to now you're introducing more and more food handlers that may or may not have food handler certifications or different aspects in place, and there's a lot of intricacies in this, and it was always a challenge when you have multiple sources of how the food is actually getting in front of a customer and going through that entire value chain. And so I think what we've been able to identify, and this goes back to what Derek's saying, is like, where are the opportunity areas? How can we improve? And how can we not improve? What's outside of our control? And so one of the pieces of data tracking that we really focus on is, okay, if we know that everything was held at the appropriate temperature, was within expiration, went through all safety audits and checklists, and everyone at this restaurant location had their hands cleaned, then with fair level of certainty, you can understand that this wasn't something that could have happened within the restaurant environment. And that's really helpful when you're communicating out. And we hear customers say this time and time again. Listen, we have a complaint that came through and we want to address that. We need to address that. Great news. We can pull our hand washing. We can pull our temperature. We can pull our expiration. And what people often will say is, okay, yeah, actually, I think I feel good about it now. Maybe I got it from somewhere else. And there is this element of making sure that we're protecting each other and protecting the brand and protecting the food all at once. And so getting recognition and credit from doing the right thing by having data driven tools behind these aspects and by implementing and sourcing those, not only can that be utilized at a broader level, as Derek was mentioning, to identify where risks are before they happen. But it also can be used post it happening to showcase that the right thing was done, that the corrective action was taken, that these elements were happening. Because, an auditor comes in and says, all right, find me day April 6th. There was something that we've got going on, and we want to understand what happened on April 6th at 2 p.m. We don't want someone shifting through old binders and trying to find the corrective action that was on a sticky note. What we want is managers to feel empowered to say, absolutely, let me go into my auditor portion of our data dashboard. Let me pull all of our hand washes, all of our temperature logs, all of our expiration. And as you can imagine, it's like, oh, okay, great, looks good. So it's an empowerment tool for those moments when there's a lot of unpredictability around different sourcing and factors and vectors, both coming into an establishment and leaving an establishment.
Christine, a lot of what you're saying, I think, is also tied to the work that Nick is doing. Nick, you have a question from Rachel. Not me, Rachel, different Rachel in the audience. I like to speak in
Hi,
the third
Rachel.
person. Rachel, not me, asks, what strategies does AFS recommend in order to maximize the financial benefits of achieving and maintaining food safety certifications? How can you justify that, that kind of
Okay.
spend?
Good question. Very good question. Two sides. Two sides to that. I should say. We work with quite a lot of companies where obviously everybody becomes trained and accredited, and we recommend that if you have Facebook, if you have a website, advertise the fact that all your staff are trained. We are proud, new store opening, we are proud to say such and such has now got the manager certification, the staff have got the manager certificate, the food handler certification. Actively advertise it, because again, from a consumer perception, food safety, rightly or wrongly, equates to, in a consumer's perception, to the quality of food. And it shouldn't, but it does. People do go, "Oh, this is amazing." So it's all about driving the brand of your restaurant, of your business, out there into the market. Yes, it's a digital market now, and anybody less than 4.5 on Google reviews now, people walk past to the next restaurant. We all do it. So how do you get that? Well, again, it's that type of marketing. It's that type of pushing it out, saying to people, "Look, we've got everybody's trained," and it just brings that, it's that mindset and that consumer to go, I'm going to eat safely here, the food's going to be good, it's going to be a good experience. It's that you can't, it's an intangible, but it does work, we've found. And from the other point of view, in attracting staff, if you are advertising this, and if a server's coming to look at your restaurant, they might be having 2 or 3 interviews, and they might have got online just quickly to look, and it'll be like, oh, okay, Great Show's Deli, I'm going to be trained in 3 days. I'm going to be full. It may be the tip for them to come and work for you rather than a competitor and stay there. So there's kind of two sides to that. Um, Third party channels. Just kind of come back to what Christine said, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
All right. There's been a huge increase in Just Eat, Uber, DoorDash, etc. And it probably saved a lot of businesses through COVID, so there is a good thing. From a food safety perspective, it worries me, because you cook that food, it is perfectly, it's temperature, it's well cooked, it's safe when it leaves your restaurant. And then unfortunately, it might sit in somebody's 10-year-old Toyota for 30 minutes before it gets to the person's house. And as Christina said, you do get problems, and people will complain the food's cold, it's not been delivered. It's not your fault, it's the Uber. And we are pushing. We sit on the FDA's board, on the ANSI board, and we are pushing to say food delivery drivers should be food safety trained, and it's basic
Absolutely.
common sense. They clean the cars. They're not smoking. They're not drinking. They're not. eating from the food, and we've all seen it. And we are obviously talking to these giant companies to say you really have some responsibility to train those staff. We're hitting a brick wall at the moment, but we're all pushing as food trading providers to it. And sorry, I know tell me when to stop talking, by the way. Uh, and the thing we found, what Christine you just said, is you can look at and prove that it's left at that temperature, it's been rightly cooked. What we've seen where there is a customer complaint and a refund, the business are actually directly talking to that customer and saying, "We're really sorry it's happened. I know you've got your £5 off Uber. You spent $80, but they're giving you £5, $5. Sorry, back from Uber. We apologise. Please come and see us. The food left us in, and it's having again that communication back to that customer because, like I said, that customer may not come back to your restaurant if that food's been delivered cold, and it's not the restaurant's fault. This is what we kind of try and prove. So I'm talking too much again. I do this, so I'm going to stop talking now.
Well, everything that you're saying makes sense, and it's incredibly insightful. I think one thing that I wanted to call out, Nick, is I don't think a lot of people realize that food safety providers aren't enemies. They're working together.
No.
The FDA is working,
Yeah.
AFS is working with
Yes.
with the ANSI board. Can
Yeah.
you very briefly, so people know, because I think we're seeing this
Yeah.
more and more. ANSI, what does ANSI stand for? What does ANAB stand
Sorry.
for?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, the trading, the certification providers. Why can I not say that word today? That's ourselves, Serve Safe, State Food Safety. We are accredited providers of ANSI, which is American National Standards Institute. They are the awarding body that grants certification to ourselves, Serve Safe. ANAB's the new name for ANSI, which is confusing everybody. So they grant us permission to uh, basically use training and an examination that is meets their standards that a health inspector will accept. That's it. What we also do, and this is ongoing, we all sit on the same committee. So you've got ourselves, Serve Safe, State Food, you've got ANSI, you've got different restaurant chains and grocery chains, you've got the FDA, USDA, and CDC, and we all look at the food code and we look at how is it going to be revised in 4 years, what needs taken off it, what's changed, and what's coming. So things like automatic temperature monitoring, that's been talked about at the FDA. How does an inspector look at it? What do they, because instead of getting the old book with all the handwritten notes, what are they looking at now? How can they look at it? How is Uber affecting the food safety market? Because they see it's a problem. It's the last 30 minutes that's the problem. So we are talking to them, say, right, you need, even if it's just 1 hour basic food handler training, you have to give it. And that's kind of how we all sit together and we work. It's for the best, it's for the better of the food safety and the consumer is what we're trying to do. Talking too much again, sorry. But yeah,
Well,
we work together.
and I think that I'm purposely wanted to bring that up because when we talk about ROI, Derek was talking about the intangibles earlier. These
Yeah,
are the intangibles. These are the
yes,
things that are actually happening behind the scenes to ensure
yeah,
that restaurants are seeing ROI on their food safety programming. It's about
yeah,
partnership, and it's
yeah,
about everybody. And Christine, as you were saying earlier, no one's trying to hurt people.
no,
Everyone's trying to keep them safe. There just has to be better education. And I think
yeah,
arguably, Derek, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, and then I'll do my lightning round question with all of you. Um, Arguably, there's a lot of customer education that needs to start happening as well. But I'm only speaking from the perspective of an ex teacher who thinks, well, do customers actually know what ANSI accredited means? Do they know what the important, right? Do they need to? How
I,
important is, all of that?
Restaurant operators don't know half the time what ANSI is or NSF is. Great example. We brought in NSF certified individually wrapped gluten-free brownies. Sent them out. They've been wildly successful. One of the franchisees called me. I'm going to take these out of the package and put them in the cookie display case. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like you you completely destroyed the whole construct of what's supposed to be happening here. So I mean, you know, do customers really want to be educated? I don't know. I mean, I think they just want to have a good meal and feel safe. And, I think they draw assumptions based on cleanliness. I think they draw assumptions based on staff interaction. I think your brand reputation, whether, like you said, people go online first. I mean, if you're shopping for something to eat, where do you start? You start with Google. And then you work your way from there. I mean, word of mouth still very much exists, but I don't know. I mean, I know that we have robust programs, and when these things do happen, we have the data to validate, or I don't want to say dispute because it's not the right word, but you know, it is a dispute. That you're
Give
probably
comfort.
wrong. I mean, if you look at our internal error rates from our native online ordering, it's like 0.3%. And if you look at our error rates on third parties, it's 2.5%. How is it the same kitchen, the same people doing the same exact things have a 7x disparity rate of 7x in error rates, right? So,
Mm,
and customers don't associate that food with DoorDash or Uber. It's with my brand. The problem's with me. It's not with them.
right.
I mean, you read these reports, and it depends on what report you read. 70 to 80% of third-party drivers have admitted to eating customers' food. So, I mean, they're putting their hands, who have been driving a car, touching a steering wheel, touching a shifting knob, and now they're putting their hands into our customers' food. So, I mean, but customers don't care. It's Groucho's made that sandwich.
Right.
DoorDash was just the last mile delivery. So, but I think early on people assumed that operators were like, oh, it's not our problem once it walks out the door, but that is not the case at all. They are still our customer. We don't own their data, but they are our customer. Um, it,
Well,
I think we have to instill and share our message. I mean, we have strong sustainability messages, and we incorporate our health messages in those, and our quality messages, and
mm,
it's the story you tell, really, and how you convey that message to your customers, whether it's through blogging, through email posts, through social media. You can tell your story in a progressive way and weave in the food safety component without it being abrasive, is the ultimate answer to your question.
I feel like there's a whole other webinar we need to have just about this. Um, but all great points. We have 60 seconds, which is perfect for this last question because I'm going to force all of you to say 2 words. I want to end with a quick lightning round. For those of you watching, I did not prepare them for this, so it's going to be as genuine as possible. But if you could describe the future of food safety in just 2 words, what 2 words would you choose? And you cannot explain yourself. You just have to say the 2 words. Christine, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, I say predictive and holistic.
Derek?
Data driven.
Nick?
Staff focused.
All right, there you have it. Well, thanks, Derek from Groucho's, Christine from PathSpot, Nick from Always Food Safe for joining me today. Really, really wonderful discussion. We packed a lot into a very small amount of time, so really appreciate you all, the data that you brought to the table, and your insights. We'll see you next time. Bye.